Hey guys, tonight we begin with something chillier than your Aunt Linda's silent judgment at Thanksgiving. Surviving winter as a medieval woman, not the glamorous, gown-wearing, sipping mead by the fire kind of medieval woman you see in movies, but the real dirt under your nails. What's that smell? I hope I wake up with all my fingers kind. If you've ever thought your thermostat wars with your spouse were bad, imagine arguing over who gets to sleep closest to the cow. Or better yet, imagine battling hypothermia with nothing but 5 layers of wool, an immortal draft, and the delicate aroma of barnyard funk. Before we dig into the delightful world of medieval misery, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of thing. Otherwise, I promise I'll never guilt trip you. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that medieval howling wind ambience, and cocoon yourself in a blanket. Trust me, you'll need all the comfort you can get for tonight's adventure. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how medieval women actually survived the worst months of the year? Did they really sleep in a giant family pile like a bunch of cold, slightly resentful hamsters? What did they wear besides everything at once? Was washing actually a winter survival hazard? Was the layer of grime a fashion statement or just insulation? What happened if the fire went out and you woke up with icicles on your eyebrows? Would you last a week sleeping on a straw mattress with mystery stains? Or would you tap out at the first whiff of a goat? Congratulations. You've just woken up at 13:47. The floor is dirt, the air is suspiciously smoky, and your to-do list is don't die before April. Good luck. You jolt awake, shivering, under a heap of scratchy wool blankets, straw poking you in all the wrong places. You're alive, which means you beat the night, the draft, and possibly a chicken roosting on your feet. There's frost on your eyelashes and someone's elbow in your ribcage. Welcome to another glorious day in a medieval winter, where survival is your morning routine. The first thing you notice is the air. It's thick with the scent of cold ashes, livestock, and last night's communal stew. The next thing you notice is the numbness. Your nose feels like a baby turnip. Your toes, you assume, are still attached, but you're not about to check just yet. Around you, the house is waking up too. Slowly, grumpily, and all at once. There's no gentle alarm clock or the soothing chime of your phone. Instead, you get the lovely soundtrack of a family member's joints cracking, a cow snorting by the hearth, and the unmistakable sound of someone stepping on a chicken. Let's talk about your bed, if you can call it that. Technically, it's a wooden frame with a sack of last season's straw, generously shared by several generations of fleas and, on particularly lucky nights, a mouse with big dreams. The straw has been changed twice this year, once for Lent, and once because it simply walked out on its own. You nestle deeper into the crunchy pile, hunting for a warm patch, and hoping today is not the day you become a cautionary tale for the village children. Don't be like Agnes. She rolled out of bed and never rolled back. Of course, you're not sleeping alone. Personal space is a foreign concept. Your siblings, parents, the baby, the dog, and anyone else who needed a patch of warmth all piled in together. It's like being the middle turnip in a crowded stew. On the upside, body heat is the one renewable resource you have. On the downside, so is morning breath. The house itself is a masterpiece of medieval construction, meaning it's cold, crooked, and defies every modern safety code. Your walls are a patchwork of sticks, clay, and wishful thinking. Every gap is a drafty invitation for the north wind to swing by and say hello. If you listen closely, you can hear the wind arguing with the smoke from last night's fire, trying to decide who gets to make your life more miserable today. Getting up is a tactical decision. Do you risk exposing your entire body to the icy air? Or do you pretend to be asleep until someone else braves it first? Usually, it's the youngest who gets elbowed out as the family fire starter, a medieval rite of passage involving numb fingers and, if they're lucky, only minimal singeing. You finally emerge from your nest of blankets like a very reluctant butterfly. Your feet hit the packed dirt floor, which is marginally warmer than the surface of the moon. Instantly, you regret every decision that led you to this moment, especially the one about sleeping on the edge. The draft from the door is relentless, sneaking in like an in-law during the holidays, determined to make its presence felt. The day's first task? Checking for missing digits? You flex your toes. All there. Small victories. Then you eye the chamber pot in the corner. Full, cold, and already brimming with regret. You make a mental note to avoid being the one who empties it today. Outside, the pale dawn creeps through the greasy window cloth, illuminating the room with all the charm of a low-budget horror film. This is the daily medieval lottery. Will the roof leak today? Will the straw mattress finally collapse? Will the cow finally learn not to step on your hand? If you're lucky, you survive with only a few bruises and a newfound appreciation for modern heating. If you're unlucky, well, at least you'll be famous. Nothing brings a medieval village together like gossip about a frozen peasant. But for now, you're still alive. You survived another night. And in the depths of a medieval winter, that's not just an achievement. It's an Olympic sport. Congratulations. Now, get up and do it all again. The day's just getting started. You need to pee. The bathroom is a bucket behind the door, already full because someone in your family had beans for dinner. Outside? Absolutely not. It's minus whatever, and wolves are a legitimate concern. You pray the bucket doesn't tip and congratulate yourself for not slipping on last night's chamber pot disaster. There is no privacy. Not even the polite kind where people look away and pretend not to hear you. If you're lucky, everyone else is still huddled in bed, desperately holding on to the last shreds of warmth and dignity. If you're unlucky, someone is watching, possibly a relative, possibly a chicken. Either way, the audience is unavoidable, and the applause is always silent but judging. The bucket, of course, is communal. There's no special label or reserved seating. It's first come, first relieved, and may the odds be ever in your favor. Sometimes there's a second bucket, but it's missing or frozen solid because someone left it outside last night, and now it's an artifact. Congratulations! You're living in the original open-plan bathroom, complete with all the sights, sounds, and smells you never wanted. But let's say you're feeling brave. You decide to risk a dash outside, against all logic and maternal advice. The door creaks open, letting in a gust of air so cold it could sharpen knives. You peer into the darkness, searching for glowing eyes. The night is long gone, but the wolves haven't read the script. You tiptoe through the frozen yard. Every step a gamble. Will you step in mud, manure, or that one mysterious spot that's somehow both? If you make it to the privy, a glorified hole surrounded by leaning planks and optimism, you realize you've forgotten the most essential item of all, wiping material. There's no toilet paper, not even the one-ply tragedy from gas stations. Instead, you have a proud selection of medieval options: a frozen rag, a handful of moss, last summer's dried leaves, or a piece of straw with ambitions. If you're fancy, maybe a bit of old linen. If you're out of luck, it's just air and prayer. Hand washing? Sure, the nearest water source is a bucket by the hearth, brownish and filled with floating mysteries. Soap is a once-a-year event reserved for weddings and plagues, so you make do. Rub your hands on your tunic, wipe them dry on your skirt, and call it good. No one's judging. Their hands are just as questionable. Now it's time to get dressed. This is less pick an outfit and more try to peel yesterday's clothing off the floor without waking whatever's living in it. Your under tunic is stiff. Your outer tunic is stiffer. And your cloak is a work of art. Patched, repatched, and last washed when the king was a toddler. Everything smells like a unique blend of wood smoke, livestock, and the ghost of last winter's soup. Shoes, if you have them, are stuffed with straw and optimism. Most days you go barefoot, dancing over the frozen floor like it's hot coals, but in reverse. If your feet survive the first 5 minutes, you're officially awake. If not, well, you probably can't feel them anyway. Breakfast is an afterthought. First, you have to clear the ashes from the hearth, coax the fire back to life, and hope yesterday's stew hasn't grown legs. Meanwhile, the to-do list is screaming for your attention. Empty the chamber pot, please, not you. Sweep the floor, nudge the chicken off your pillow, and begin the noble art of ignoring the draft that cuts through your home like a disapproving ancestor. And so your morning unfolds. Between the humiliation of medieval plumbing, the quest for warmth, and the daily battle with things that scurry, by the time you've finished your bathroom routine, you haven't so much greeted the day as survived its opening act. And somehow, you're still not the last one up. So the next time you grumble about a slow flushing toilet or cold bathroom tiles, remember, you could be emptying a bucket into the street with a chicken as your only witness and frostbite nipping at your dignity. Welcome to mornings, medieval style, where getting ready is just another word for not dying of embarrassment. You pull on your undertunic, a wool dress, another tunic, and, if you're lucky, a patched-up cloak. Boots are optional. Rags tied around your feet are not. By the time you're done, you're bulkier than a modern ski lodge mascot and about as fragrant. Fashion is for people who aren't actively freezing to death. Let's set the scene. You're standing in the single shadowy corner of your home that isn't already occupied by a sleeping relative, a snoring pig, or a haystack that smells like feet. Your first challenge of the day, convincing yourself to shed your only source of warmth and change clothes. Just kidding, you don't change clothes. Not really. What you do is layer them, one over the other, until you look like the world's most exhausted onion. Your base layer? It's a linen shift, also known as your please don't let anyone see this tunic. It's scratchy, it's stained, and it probably still remembers the last 3 winters. Over that, you add a thick wool dress. This piece was once a vibrant colour, but time, smoke, and the general indifference of medieval laundry have rendered it a sort of sullen grey-brown, like a storm cloud with commitment issues. The dress is heavy, itchy, and, if you're lucky, mostly intact. Next comes your outer tunic. This is where you start getting creative. Maybe it's your older sister's hand-me-down, or maybe it's been patched so many times it's more patch than tunic. Each patch tells a story. The green bit from the year of the Great Goose Escape, the red bit from that time the turnip soup exploded, the mysterious blue patch that nobody in your family remembers owning. As you wriggle into it, you discover a bonus pocket filled with last year's straw and, if fortune favours you, a forgotten apple core. Now for the outerwear. If you're very lucky, you get a cloak. This is the medieval equivalent of a down parka, but with less thermal technology and more smells like a sheep. The cloak is heavy and may or may not have sleeves, depending on how many cousins you've inherited it from. The fastener is either a carved wooden toggle or, if you're particularly innovative, a bent nail and some string. Now, about your feet, leather boots are for the wealthy, or for people who stole from the wealthy and haven't been caught yet. Your reality is layers of rag, wrapped and rewrapped, then crammed into wooden clogs or simply tied in place with bits of twine. Every step is a reminder that arch support will not be invented for centuries. Your toes are so cold you're not entirely sure they're still attached. But the only way to check is to unwrap everything. And that's just not happening. Gloves, if you have them, are fingerless and knitted from rough wool. More likely, you're just tucking your hands into your sleeves and muttering about how much you miss summer. Hats? Absolutely. A wool cap, pulled low over your ears, maybe even tied under your chin like a very determined baby. It's not about style. It's about not waking up with your hair frozen to the wall. Scarves and shawls are a lifesaver. Women wind them around their heads, their necks, sometimes their whole bodies. By the time you're finished, you're so bundled you can barely move your arms, which is actually perfect because it keeps your body heat in and prevents you from swinging at your siblings when they inevitably start complaining about the cold. Let's not forget the real secret to medieval winter fashion: grime, dirt, sweat, kitchen grease, and livestock residue create a natural, if unintentional, insulating barrier. It's not pretty, it's not fragrant, but when the wind is howling and your home is one unfortunate gust away from falling over, you thank your lucky stars for every unsightly layer. So the next time you reach for your third sweater, spare a thought for your medieval ancestors, cocooned in 6 months' worth of clothing, wishing they could move, and counting the days until spring. Because in winter, style isn't just dead. It's been buried under 4 layers of wool and a healthy fear of frostbite. The longer you wear your clothes, the stiffer they get, but also, oddly, the warmer. Dirt and body oil create a protective layer that blocks the wind better than any brand name parka. You don't bathe, because everyone knows that letting water touch your skin in winter is a one-way ticket to pneumonia. This is not self-care. It's self-preservation. You might think of grime as an enemy, something to be scrubbed away with lavender soap and existential regret. But in the icy heart of the medieval winter, filth is your first and last line of defense. Picture it. You wrapped in a cocoon of wool, linen, and stubbornness, with an outer shell of glorious, sticky, historical dirt. This isn't laziness. This is science, at least, medieval science, which is basically regular science. But if all the textbooks were written by people with frostbite, let's break it down. Freshly laundered linen is all well and good for summer, but in January, it's a death sentence. Clean fabric breathes, which is great if you want a refreshing summer breeze. But in winter, breathing fabric is an open invitation for every icy gust to waltz right in and turn your armpits into a cautionary tale. What you want, instead, is a good, honest, greasy build-up. You want the fabric so clogged with old stew, sheep oil, and sweat that it's basically waterproof. That's not a stain. That's insulation. And about bathing? Forget it. Water in winter is for the brave or the dangerously optimistic. Heating enough for a bath means stoking the hearth for hours and using up half your firewood. You'd sooner burn your shoes, and in many cases, you already have. If you do risk it, you have to fetch buckets from the well, smash through the ice, haul them back, and then pour the water into a tub that leaks more than your roof. By the time you're ready, you could have walked to the next village for a lecture on hygiene from a monk who still hasn't forgiven you for the goose incident. So, you don't bathe. You don't change clothes. Instead, you layer dirt upon dirt, a living archaeological record of your survival. Medieval physicians, always keen to explain things with maximum creativity, insisted that bathing opens the pores, a clear and present danger when your entire life goal is to keep the cold out and your organs in. According to the local wisdom, washing away your protective coating was asking for a fever, a cough, and possibly a dramatic fainting scene in the root cellar. There's even a certain social solidarity in it. Everyone stinks. Everyone's clothes could stand up on their own. You don't judge your neighbor for their 3-month-old tunic because yours is busy evolving into a new life form. If you're lucky, the mingled odors of hay, fire, smoke, and essence of goat will mask anything too alarming. Some peasants even dab a little rosemary or dried lavender into the layers just for good measure. But honestly, if you smell like herbs, you're just advertising to the local wildlife that you taste better than average. Filth also has another bonus feature: pest control. Lice, fleas, and the ever-popular bedbug thrive in clean, fresh environments. But with enough grease and grit, you become less of a 5-star resort and more of a chemical weapons zone. It doesn't eliminate them, but it does keep the population competitive. And if anyone complains, you can always mutter that dirt is God's way of keeping you warm, and everyone else too polite to argue. Still, there's a ritual to all this. Once spring comes, you might, and this is a big might, wash everything in one great, communal, enthusiastic event. All the neighbors out on the banks of the river, bashing winter's memories out of their linens and praying the stains float downstream. For a few glorious days, the village smells almost neutral, and then, inevitably, the cycle begins again. So when you're clutching your triple insulated water bottle and shivering at the thought of skipping your morning shower, just remember, somewhere in your ancestry is a medieval peasant who wore filth like armor and called it progress, because, in the end, it wasn't about looking good. It was about staying alive, one glorious, unwashed layer at a time. Your bed is a sack filled with old straw, lumpy, mouldy, and already crawling with things you try not to think about. Every turn is a crunch. Every morning is a gamble. Will you wake up to warmth? Or to a spider's nest in your hair? Luxury, defined very differently. Let's set the nighttime scene. You don't climb into bed. You sort of negotiate with it. The straw mattress, known grandly as a palliasse, is flattened on one side, mysteriously lumpy on the other, and audibly protesting every move you make. Every toss and turn is accompanied by the sound of crackling stems and the subtle, never-pleasant sensation of something wiggling just out of sight. Sleep hygiene, in this world, means hoping the largest insect stays near your feet. Your palliasse is stuffed with the leftovers of last year's harvest. Wheat, barley, sometimes even hay. Basically, whatever the livestock was too picky to eat. It started out fluffy, but after a few months, or years, if you're feeling especially authentic, it's compressed into something that could double as packing material for a medieval trebuchet. If you're lucky, your family changes out the straw twice a year. Once at Lent. Once when someone finally complains about the mushrooms sprouting in the corners. If you're unlucky, well, congratulations, you've invented penicillin. As for bedding, the sheets are a loose suggestion. Maybe there's a bit of linen, maybe a rough wool blanket. More often, it's just your cloak, a sheepskin, or the coat you wore all day. Pillows? That's a soft word for spare tunic rolled into a ball. Some families just skip the pleasantries and use a bundle of straw for that too, creating the world's crunchiest sleep experience. There's no such thing as a bedroom. Everyone sleeps in the same space. Parents, siblings, small children, an opportunistic cat, and at least one chicken who refuses to sleep anywhere else. Privacy? Not unless you count the thin line of straw separating you from your brother's feet. If you do have your own bed, it means you're a widow, an elder, or someone the rest of the family is actively trying to avoid. Temperature control? That's a medieval joke. In winter, you pile on every available blanket, cloak, and family member, forming a desperate huddle of body heat and snoring. In summer, You toss off the top layers and hope the smell of last winter's sweat will scare away the mosquitoes. The bed is strategically placed as close to the fire as possible, but never so close that you risk being set alight. The best spot, nearest the hearth, farthest from the draft, goes to babies, grandparents, or whoever whined the loudest that day. Let's talk about the critter situation. Straw mattresses are a 5-star resort for fleas, lice, beetles, and the occasional mouse family. If you hear scratching in the night, you just pull the blanket over your head and hope it's not something with teeth. Everyone in the Middle Ages was used to a certain level of crawling company. It was less about getting rid of them and more about hoping you weren't their main course. If you're feeling especially fancy, you might have a bed frame, a creaky wooden structure that looks suspiciously like last year's firewood. But most peasants make do with their palliasse directly on the dirt floor. You tuck your feet under your sibling for warmth, wrap your cloak tight, and say a quick prayer for an itchless night. The irony, of course, is that you're exhausted enough to sleep anywhere. After 14 hours of labor, you could nod off standing up. The medieval mattress isn't about comfort, it's about survival. You wake up sore, but at least you wake up. And if you're still dreaming of memory foam, you're clearly not sleep-deprived enough yet. So tonight, as you sink into your cloud-soft modern bed, just remember, your medieval ancestors survived winter nights atop a crunchy, living pile of straw, with nothing but stubbornness, grit, and maybe a goat for company. If that's not resilience, what is? Your home is made of mud, sticks, and ambition. Every wall has a draft, and the roof leaks more than a medieval secret. You stuff moss and rags into the cracks and pretend it's insulation. It isn't, but it might keep the goat from leaving. Let's paint a picture of your humble abode. It's a one-room wonder, if you're lucky. The technical term is wattle and daub, which sounds like a fancy medieval spa treatment, but actually means you live inside a basket someone tried to bury in a swamp. Woven sticks form the skeleton of the wall, packed tight with mud, dung, hay, and whatever else you could grab before the neighbor saw you stealing their compost pile. If you squint, it almost looks solid. If you press too hard, you'll meet your neighbor through the new hole in the wall. Every home is a monument to DIY spirit and questionable engineering. When the wind picks up, the entire house hums. Sometimes it sings. You plug the worst drafts with whatever is handy. Old rags, last year's bread, a handful of soggy moss, or, in a pinch, a strategically placed chicken. You never let the good moss go to waste. That's for the truly Arctic breezes that cut straight to your bones. Of course, nothing actually keeps out the cold, but it does give you the illusion of control, which is basically the same as warmth. The floor is dirt. Good, honest, unswept earth, possibly hiding yesterday's supper and a few chicken feathers for flavor. If you're lucky, someone tried to pave it with old cobbles or animal bones. But mostly it's a living, breathing ecosystem that's technically also your living room carpet. When it rains, your floor turns to mud. When it snows, you get indoor slush. Some folks say that a muddy floor is healthy for your feet. Those people are called liars. Windows? You wish. The closest thing is a hole in the wall, covered with an oiled cloth, a wooden shutter, or the world's saddest attempt at glass. A blurry, warped pane so precious that it's protected by more superstition than practicality. In winter, every opening is plugged tight to keep the icy wind at bay, turning your house into a dark, smoky cave where the only source of light is the fire and the glimmer of hope you'll make it to spring. Now for the roof, a medieval masterpiece. Thatched if you're lucky, or just piled up branches and desperate prayers if you're not. The thatch is a nesting paradise for birds, mice, and the occasional family of weasels. It leaks in 5 places you know about, and 3 you discover every time it rains. During a proper storm, You rearrange your entire life around the drips, moving beds, buckets, and sometimes relatives to dodge the latest indoor waterfall. You never truly own your home. You just negotiate with it. Space is at a premium. The fire takes up the best spot, because warmth outranks everything. The family huddles around the hearth for heat and light, with sleeping mats, baskets, and livestock arranged in a kind of chaotic ballet. The animals come inside for warmth, at least that's the official story. Unofficially, the cow comes in because the cow does what she wants, and nobody is brave enough to tell her otherwise. You dream of real insulation, but in reality, you get condensation. The ceiling drips, the walls sweat, and if you leave bread out overnight, it turns into a science experiment. Mold isn't just an occasional visitor, it's a roommate. Your lungs are strong though, because you spend most of the winter breathing in a fog of wood smoke, animal dander, and whatever the wind blew in through the cracks. Despite it all, your house stands. It's battered, it's freezing, and it leans suspiciously to one side. But it's home. It's a patchwork of hard work, desperate repairs, and the stubborn hope that maybe next year you'll finally fix that hole. Until then, you pack another rag in the wall, smile bravely, and pray for a mild winter, or at least for a goat that doesn't wander off in the night. The hearth is the center of your universe. If it dies out overnight, you're in trouble. You spend hours banking coals under ashes, praying you don't have to start from scratch in the morning. If the fire's out, you might as well invite frostbite to move in. Let's talk priorities. In medieval winter, you can forget about Wi-Fi, cable, or even reliable door hinges. Your main obsession is the fire. It's the only source of heat, light, cooked food, hot water, and, let's be honest, hope. The entire household orbits around the hearth. It's not just a practical necessity. It's practically a member of the family. You don't name your fire, but you think about it more than most relatives. Every evening, you and whoever else is unlucky enough to draw the short straw hover around the embers, using a mix of science, superstition, and wishful thinking to bank the fire. This involves scraping the coals into a tight pile and smothering them with ashes so they stay alive, but not too alive. If you get it right, you'll have glowing embers come morning. Get it wrong, and you'll be trying to spark a new fire with flint and steel while your entire family shivers and silently judges you for centuries. Fire making in winter is not a hobby, it's a test of character. You can't just flick a lighter and call it a day. If you've ever watched someone try to start a barbecue with wet charcoal, multiply that frustration by 10 and subtract all modern conveniences. You crouch in front of the hearth, hunched like a medieval gremlin, blowing gently on stubborn coals and wondering if you're breathing life into the fire or just making yourself dizzy. Your reward for success is basic survival. Your punishment for failure is a cold house, angry relatives, and the possibility of being forever known as the one who let the fire die. But the real drama happens at night. No one sleeps easy. There's always that anxious moment just before you drift off when you wonder, did I bank the coals enough? Maybe you get up to check, prodding the ashes like a surgeon, then tucking a fresh log nearby just in case. In larger families, this becomes a rotating responsibility. If you're the youngest, congratulations, you're on fire duty for the next decade. And let's not forget, fuel, wood, is precious. If you have a forest nearby, you're lucky. But don't get caught gathering sticks from the Lord's land. Poaching firewood can get you fined, flogged, or worse. You make do with whatever you can scavenge. Fallen branches, bits of old fence, last year's chair. Some people get creative, burning dried cow dung, bundles of twigs, even peat if they're in the right part of the world. Each fuel has its own unique aroma, ranging from pleasantly earthy to apocalyptic barnyard. During the day, the hearth is the home's gathering place. You cook over it, dry your socks by it, and nurse your chilblains in front of it. On a good day, it fills the air with comforting warmth and the faint scent of burnt onion. On a bad day, it chokes the room with smoke because the wind is blowing the wrong way and you forgot to poke a hole in the thatch. Medieval ventilation is a gamble, and everyone's eyes are permanently half-watery. Then there's the constant threat of disaster. Too much wood, and the fire might leap out and eat your house. Too little and the coals sputter out, dooming you to a day of striking flint and muttering curses. On especially unlucky mornings, the fire is nothing but a pile of cold ash and broken dreams, and you have to beg a neighbor for a light, awkward, but slightly less humiliating than admitting you failed the hearth. Still, when the fire catches and the flames dance in the gloom, it's nothing short of magic. You're warm, you're fed, you're safe for another night, and you can smugly announce the fire's still going as everyone crawls out from their nest of blankets. Because in medieval winter, keeping the hearth alive isn't just a chore, it's a triumph. And the only thing standing between you and the cold, unblinking eyes of winter itself. You master the art of tucking embers under ash, a routine as sacred as prayer. Everyone in the house has advice on how to do it properly. If you mess up, expect a frosty reception from your family. Literally. Medieval firebanking is less of a science and more of a performance art, complete with critics, backseat drivers, and family members who only notice your mistakes. There's a whole culture around the process, rituals, rumors, and the occasional passive-aggressive observation from your mother-in-law, who never lost a fire in her 40 winters. Thank you very much. Picture it. The sun is setting and the house is winding down. It's time for the evening's most important task, one that determines whether you'll wake up to glowing warmth or embark on the miserable quest to steal a coal from the neighbor's hearth. You crouch in front of the fire, the house behind you filled with expectant silence and the smell of turnip stew. There's pressure. This is your moment. The theory is simple. You gather the remaining embers, sweep them into a tidy pile in the middle of the hearth, and then cover them gently with a thick layer of ashes. Not too thin, or the coals will burn out. Not too thick, or they'll smother and suffocate. There's a just right Goldilocks zone, but finding it takes years of practice, several ruined mornings, and the constant threat of public shaming. You use a stick, an old spoon, or whatever implement is closest, not for lack of tools, but because every family has a fire poker that's never actually been poked in its life. The advice, though, never ends. Grandpa says the ash should be cool to the touch. Aunt Maud insists you add a pinch of salt for luck. Your older sister claims you need to recite a rhyme about St. Bridget. And your little brother just wants to poke things until they catch fire or he gets yelled at, whichever comes first. Some people insist you can hear the embers humming if you're quiet enough, which is probably just the sound of your stomach protesting dinner. Let's say you nail it. You bank the fire perfectly. There's a collective sigh of relief, and you're free to crawl into bed with a modicum of dignity. But if you get it wrong, the morning is tense. There's no disappointment quite like watching your mother shake her head in silence, reaching for the flint while your siblings glare at you over their cold breakfast. No fire means a cold house, cold food, and a family that spends the day inventing colourful new ways to suggest you sleep in the barn. For those rare moments when everything goes south, the restart process is a medieval ordeal. First, you try to coax life back into the fire with desperate puffs of breath and muttered curses. If that fails, you spend a chilly hour striking flint and steel making enough sparks to light up a stadium, but never quite enough to ignite even the world's driest straw. At this point, you start bargaining with God, the fire, and the neighbor who owns the village's only candle. Humiliation peaks when you wrap a coal in a cabbage leaf and sprint through the cold, hoping the wind doesn't snatch your last hope out from under you. It's not all misery, though. There's a quiet pride in a well-banked fire. The warmth lingers through the night, a gentle heat that promises another morning of survival. The little red glow is a victory, a tiny rebellion against the winter outside. You can brag about it later, over breakfast, as you soak up your family's reluctant admiration. Even the cat seems impressed, curling closer to the hearth and bestowing upon you the highest medieval honor, not leaving dead mice in your shoes. So tonight, as you smooth the ashes and tuck the coals in for their slumber, remember, this is more than a chore. It's a life hack with real, immediate consequences. In the end, firebanking is equal parts skill, superstition, and a tiny dash of medieval luck. And whether you wake up to warmth or frostbite, at least you'll have a good story. And possibly a few new tips from Aunt Maud. Forget privacy. Everyone sleeps together in a big, jumbled heap for warmth. You, your siblings, your parents, sometimes your neighbors, and always at least one animal. Every night is a battle for the warmest spot, and a lottery to avoid being next to Uncle Raymond's feet. Let's face it, in medieval winter, personal space is just a rumor. Your bedroom is the only room, and your bed is wherever you can claim a patch of straw or a corner of the family palliasse. As the sun sets and the house grows colder, everyone gravitates toward the hearth like moths to a very smoky, very sooty flame. The hierarchy is as old as the leaky roof, babies, and the sickest get the best spots, and the rest of you get what's left. It's the world's least glamorous game of musical chairs, except the music is someone snoring, and the only prize is not freezing to death. You don't choose your sleeping companions so much as you inherit them. Siblings are elbowed into place. Parents call dibs on the wall, and the baby always ends up in the toasty center, like a raisin in a human pudding. If you're especially unlucky, Cousin Agnes or your neighbor's visiting nephew joins the pile, politely pretending not to notice when you accidentally kick them for the third time. And the animals? They're non-negotiable. The family goat is basically a heated water bottle with horns, and the dog is your designated foot warmer, whether you asked for it or not. Every night, there's a mad dash to secure a prime spot. The place by the fire is the golden ticket, but it comes with risks. Too close, and you spend the night sweating and listening to embers pop dangerously close to your hair. Too far, and you're pressed against a freezing wall that's developed its own ecosystem of mold and regret. Some strategists prefer the middle, wedged between warm bodies. But then you're guaranteed a night of being squished like medieval sandwich meat. Then there's the unique problem of medieval bed etiquette. The polite rule is, don't ask, don't smell. Feet in your face, just roll over. Someone's hair in your mouth, chew quietly and hope it's not the neighbors. If you're especially sensitive to noise, too bad. The symphony of snoring, coughing, mumbling, and mysterious rustling is as much a part of the experience as the straw mattress. You learn to sleep through everything, except, perhaps, the infamous midnight flatulence, which is less a faux pas and more a family tradition. Privacy, if you're lucky enough to have heard of it, is something for nobles and fairy tales. Changing clothes? Just turn your back and hope nobody peeks. Whispered secrets are instantly public knowledge, and even your dreams seem to leak out into the shared air. The only escape is a night spent on the edge, where at least one side of your body is guaranteed to be cold but blissfully untouched by other people's limbs. There are, of course, upsides. In a world with no central heating, body heat is currency. When the wind howls and the snow piles up outside, you're grateful for every elbow and every accidental knee to the stomach. The family pile is a furnace built out of necessity, and you're a crucial brick. If someone rolls away in the night, you feel it immediately, a sudden draft and a cold shock that snaps you awake. You mutter, you shift, you drag them back, because survival means sticking together, literally. Sometimes, when everyone's finally settled, there's a rare moment of peace. The fire casts a soft glow over sleeping faces, and the low hum of collective breathing feels almost comforting. It's not glamorous, it's not comfortable, but it's human. You drift off, grateful for warmth, for company, and even for Uncle Raymond, just as long as he keeps his feet to himself tonight. So, next time you complain about sharing a bed or missing your memory foam mattress, remember the medieval family pile. No privacy, lots of warmth, and memories that stick with you, sometimes in the form of actual straw. There's a cow near the door, 2 goats by the fire, and a chicken eyeing your pillow. It's a regular petting zoo, but it's not for fun. The animals radiate warmth, and everyone silently agrees not to complain about the smell, because the alternative is hypothermia. Let's take a closer look at the original open-concept floor plan. In medieval winter, your home is less of a private residence and more of a group huddle against the cold. Forget the idea of a separate barn, a cozy animal shelter, or, heaven forbid, a heated stable. The reality is this: livestock and humans sharing the same air, the same heat, and sometimes the same unfortunate bout of nighttime flatulence. Why are the animals inside? Because survival is a team sport. The body heat of a cow isn't just comforting, it's a literal lifesaver. Medieval peasants knew that a single cow could throw off enough warmth to make the difference between shivering and sleeping. In fact, if you're extra lucky, you've got more than one species joining you. Goats are surprisingly efficient radiators. Chickens? Their contribution is small, but mighty, especially if you're competing for the warmest spot in the house and you don't mind waking up with feathers in your hair. Every night, as the temperature drops, the animal parade begins. Someone herds the goats inside. Someone else guides the cow to her corner by the door. She always claims the same spot, creature of habit. The chickens flap and fuss, and then settle down in a spot that's always slightly more inconvenient than you'd hoped. Maybe there's a pig snoring under the table, or a sheep tucked by the hearth, keeping its own counsel and a suspiciously close eye on your dinner. With all these bodies in one room, the air gets dense. There's a rich aroma, a kind of barnyard bouquet, that no candle or sprig of dried lavender can touch. The smoke from the hearth swirls with the natural perfume of animal breath, old hay, and a dozen kinds of dung. But no one complains. You all know the rules. If you can see your breath indoors, you can't afford to be picky about the help. Of course, living with animals comes with challenges. The cow occasionally gets restless at 3 a.m. and decides to stretch her legs. Good luck to anyone sleeping by the door. Goats have zero respect for personal space. They'll nibble anything: tunics, blankets, hair, that mysterious loaf of bread you were saving for breakfast. Chickens are the wild cards. They lay eggs wherever they want, so your pillow may surprise you in the morning. And let's not talk about what happens if you leave your shoes unattended. But it's not all chaos. There's a strange sense of security in the rhythm of shared survival. The soft lowing of the cow is a lullaby, the gentle bleat of goats a reassurance, and the quiet cluck of chickens a reminder that tomorrow there might be breakfast, if you're quick enough to find it before someone else does. The animals keep away thieves. Nobody's sneaking up on a house full of honking geese, and lend an almost festive atmosphere to winter nights. Medieval life might be grim, but it's never lonely. There's also the financial side of things. Animals indoors are less likely to be stolen or eaten by wolves. If you wake up to find the cow missing, it wasn't frostbite that got her. It was your neighbor, with sticky fingers and a very big cloak. Every beast is precious, a source of milk, meat, warmth, and manure, the medieval gift that keeps on giving. The family's fortunes, sometimes their very lives, depend on keeping the animals close. So yes, it's crowded, it's smelly, it's noisy in ways modern people can't quite imagine. But when the wind howls outside and the frost creeps across the windows, you thank your lucky stars for every bleating, snuffling, clucking housemate. Because in the war against winter, the more bodies, the merrier and the warmer. You wear everything you own at once, and then wrap yourself in more cloth at bedtime. Layering is less about fashion and more about survival. If it's soft, it's on your body. If it's scratchy, it's also on your body. Medieval winter fashion has one rule. More. Forget matching colors, coordinated outfits, or even the concept of comfort. The only goal is to trap every molecule of warmth between as many layers as you can manage, without actually collapsing from the sheer bulk. Getting dressed is less of a routine, and more of an archaeological dig through the family pile of clothing. Every tunic, shawl, and rag with even a whisper of warmth gets an audition. Your first layer is always the linen shift. It's thin, it's scratchy, and it hasn't seen soap since midsummer. But it's the only thing standing between your skin and the full medieval textile experience. Over that, you pull on a wool dress or tunic, or both again. It depends on how many you can find, what's still dry, and who you have to bargain with to get the least stained one. Medieval siblings guard their clothing like dragons, and nothing says sibling rivalry like trying to outmaneuver your sister for the family's only halfway decent woolen underskirt. Once you're wrapped in 2 or 3 base layers, it's time to get creative. Scarves become shawls. Shawls become makeshift hats. Hats become mittens if you're really desperate. Some days, you wrap strips of cloth around your arms and legs like a very cold, very grumpy mummy. Every inch of you is covered. Your ears, your neck, and if you're especially clever, your nose, which is always the first casualty in the battle against frostbite. Blankets are a family affair. There's no such thing as your blanket. It's the blanket, and you share it with at least 3 people, sometimes the dog. When bedtime rolls around, it's a high-stakes negotiation. You pile the available covers on top of the heap of sleeping bodies, careful to arrange the thinnest rags at the bottom and the thickest, least threadbare blanket on top. Someone's always left with a suspiciously damp bit of cloth, which is basically a rite of passage. If you're lucky, you might have access to an old fur or sheepskin. It's heavy, it's greasy, and it smells like its previous owner. But when the wind howls, nobody's picky. The family cloak, inherited from a time before you were born, is another classic. It's patched, lumpy, and not so much sewn as held together by hope. In the deepest winter, you might even drag in a sack or old feed bag to put over your feet. It's not elegant, but it gets the job done. Of course, all this layering has consequences. By the time you're finished getting dressed for bed, you're less of a person and more of a bundle with a face. Moving requires planning. Turning over is a group project. And going to the bathroom is a medieval escape room challenge. The only thing colder than the house is the draft that sneaks in every time someone gets up to answer nature's call in the middle of the night. Itchy? Constantly. Clean? Never. But for all the discomfort, the medieval layering strategy works. When the world outside is frozen solid and you can hear the wolves howling in the dark, you're still warm. Ish. Still breathing and still dreaming of the day when someone invents fleece pajamas and central heating. So next time you pile on one extra sweater, spare a thought for your medieval ancestors. They perfected the art of layering, out of necessity, out of desperation, and out of the basic human refusal to freeze. Because when it comes to winter, more is always more, and style is whatever keeps you alive till spring. Laundry is a summer sport. In winter, you keep your clothes as long as humanly possible, adding another layer of protective grime. Washing with icy water is for the desperate or the recently widowed. Let's get one thing straight. Nobody in the medieval world is winning any cleanliness awards. But when the temperature drops, even the most ambitious scrubbers call it quits. Soap, such as it exists, is reserved for the wealthy or those who know how to make a profit out of lard and lye. The rest of the population relies on a complex system of denial and excuses, plus the hopeful belief that dirt is basically armor against the elements. Think about it. Laundry day in winter starts with chipping your clothing off your own body. Removing your only tunic requires the courage of a minor saint and the flexibility of a medieval contortionist. You hope for the best as you peel it away, careful not to lose a layer of skin in the process. You immediately regret your decision, but it's too late to turn back. Your reward? Standing in front of a cauldron of water so cold it has ice flows, clutching a lump of homemade soap that smells like last summer's goat. The bravest souls attempt winter washing by the stream. This is the medieval equivalent of a polar bear plunge. The icy water bites your fingers until you can't feel them, and your clothes freeze solid the second you wring them out. If you hang them outside, you get the pleasure of bringing in a tunic so stiff it could stand up by itself and double as a privacy screen. That's why most women decide, you know what? This tunic can go another month. It's not laziness, it's survival. Each added layer of grime works like medieval Gore-Tex, trapping body heat and deterring the more judgmental insects. Besides, everyone else smells the same. Give or take a whiff of turnip or fermented cabbage. If you can still spot the original color of your dress, you're officially too clean and will be lectured about tempting fate and inviting a cold that'll kill you before Lent. For those rare moments when you simply must wash, say, after a particularly disastrous encounter with livestock, or because the family's collective stench is threatening to summon the local priest, you have a few options. Rainwater in a barrel is slightly warmer than the well, but only slightly. Scrubbing is done with ashes or sand if you're out of soap. No matter what, the goal is less clean and more or less sticky. Once you've washed your clothes, you drape them near the hearth, where they'll dry just enough to steam up the room and make everyone else miserable for an hour. Bathing yourself is even riskier. Most women put it off until spring, unless someone is giving birth, dying, or both. When you do attempt it, you strip down and hover over a shallow tub, ladling cold water over your shoulders and hoping nobody barges in for the chamber pot. The water is recycled for laundry or, if you're feeling thrifty, for the next person's bath. Any leftover goes to the chickens, who seem suspiciously cleaner than you do. There's a kind of quiet pride in making it through winter without washing. It's a communal agreement that everyone will ignore each other's protective layer. Complaining is reserved for summer, when the river is warm, the soap is plentiful, and even the laziest neighbor is shamed into dragging their linens to the bank for a good beating. So the next time you look at your laundry pile and sigh, remember, you could be hauling icy water in the snow, scrubbing with sand, and praying your shirt doesn't shatter from sheer cold. In the medieval world, a little dirt goes a long way, and so does a healthy respect for not catching your death trying to get clean. The pecking order is real. Babies and the elderly sleep closest to the hearth. Everyone else fans out like human insulation. Arguments break out over who gets prime real estate. Sometimes, negotiations turn violent, Occasionally, the dog wins. Let's be honest. Medieval winter sleeping is less about comfort and more about survival of the fittest and loudest. When the sun goes down and the fire is banked for the night, every person in the house turns into a real estate agent with only one listing: a patch of dirt or straw as close to the hearth as possible. The hearth, after all, is the only reliable source of warmth, light, and hope that you'll wake up without icicles in your hair. The night's first contest is the dash for the fire. Everyone has their strategy. The quick-footed try to sneak in early, claiming a spot before anyone else notices. The more cunning lay low until everyone else is distracted by the cow trying to eat the straw mattress, then slide into the best spot with all the grace of a sleep-deprived ninja. Family alliances are forged and broken nightly, with whispered bribes and bold betrayals worthy of a Shakespearean tragedy. At the top of the food chain are the babies, tiny, squalling bundles of warmth and noise who, by divine medieval law, get the hottest, safest spot. Next are the elderly, whose frail bones are at constant risk of turning into medieval popsicles. They settle in with practiced satisfaction, having survived decades of these nightly negotiations. Then come the sick, the recently injured, and anyone with a convincingly dramatic cough. "Please, I need to be close to the fire for my health," is the ancient precursor to "Can I take a sick day?" After that, it's every man, woman, and child for themselves. The strongest, sneakiest, or most shameless claim the next warmest spots. You, for example, have developed an uncanny knack for squeezing into the narrow gap between the dog and the soup pot, which isn't glamorous but does keep one side of you toasty and the other lightly scented with last night's dinner. The unlucky are relegated to the outermost ring, where the wall seeps cold and the draught is less of a breeze and more of a full-time houseguest. The negotiations are ongoing, and so are the arguments. "You had the warm spot last night." "That's my blanket." Someone's hogging the dog. Voices rise. Accusations fly. And the only impartial judge is the chicken, who somehow always ends up next to someone's head. Occasionally, someone tries to assert dominance by shoving a sibling, only to have their spot stolen while they're distracted. In extreme cases, the family matriarch lays down the law and rearranges everyone by age, usefulness, or level of complaint. Sometimes the animal wins. The family dog, who by all logic should be relegated to the far end of the room, manages to wedge himself by the fire, tongue lolling in smug triumph. The cat, meanwhile, treats all of this with the bored disdain of a creature that knows it will be warm no matter what, and occasionally decides your chest is the best possible sleeping surface, whether you agree or not. When everyone's finally arranged, the sleeping formation resembles a game of medieval Tetris, with limbs and cloaks overlapping, and just enough space left for one person to complain they're cold. If you get up in the night, you risk losing your spot, so you hold it, counting the hours till dawn or till someone else blinks first. And through it all, there's an odd comfort. The fire crackles, the family snores, and in the middle of a drafty, overcrowded house, you find warmth, if not in your sleeping spot, then in the knowledge that nobody, not even the dog, is facing the medieval winter alone. Every step away from the fire is a test of courage. Need more wood? That's a heroic quest. Need to go outside? Only if you want to risk frostbite or being the next village legend. Remember when Agnes froze to the well? In the depths of a medieval winter, inertia isn't laziness, it's tactical genius. The fire is the glowing, crackling heart of the home, and the farther you stray from it, the more you risk losing toes, dignity, and any sense of feeling in your extremities. Everyone understands this instinctively. Even the family dog, who usually lives for chaos, spends winter months curled so close to the hearth he might as well be part of the decor. Let's talk about the woodpile. The daily wood run is the closest thing to an Olympic sport you'll ever attempt. Someone always draws the short straw, and there's a ritual groan as the unlucky soul layers up, ties on every scarf, and prepares for their brief, miserable expedition. Outside, the air is so cold it practically cracks, and the woodpile is never close. Every step crunches underfoot, the snow and ice conspiring to trip you up and embarrass you in front of the chickens. Back inside, the fire watchers sit smugly, eyes glued to the returning hero. They know the dangers: slippery steps, a poorly placed bucket, maybe a lurking goose with a grudge. You sprint, grab whatever wood you can, and dash back inside. You've lost all feeling in your hands, but at least you've secured your spot near the fire for the next hour. The rules are simple. Perform a noble act, like braving the cold, and you earn prime seating until someone else takes pity on your frostbitten fingers and stages a rescue. Going outside for anything else? Only the bold or the desperate attempt it. There's always one family member who claims they don't mind the cold, and they quickly become the official icebreaker, messenger, and chicken wrangler. The rest of you watch through the fogged-up window, quietly grateful it isn't your turn. The stories are legendary. Uncle Martin, who lost a boot in a snowbank and didn't find it until spring, or little Tom, who went out for water and returned with a wild look in his eye, speaking only in shivers. Even moving inside the house is fraught with peril. Every step away from the hearth risks running into a draft so cold it makes your teeth ache. The spot nearest the door is reserved for enemies and guests you secretly hope will leave early. The edges of the room develop their own microclimate. 1 part Arctic tundra, 2 parts medieval mildew. Food? You don't fetch it unless you absolutely have to. The pot simmers over the fire, and the first person who dares leave the warmth is the one who gets to taste the dubious stew and see if it's edible, or just another experiment in root vegetable chemistry. Fetching anything from the far side of the room is considered an act of charity worthy of song. Remember the winter of '42, when Marjorie braved the cold corner to rescue the last bit of cheese? Legend. Even socializing slows to a crawl. No one wants to get up for a chat unless it's urgent, like a cow wandering too close to the embers, or a sibling plotting to steal your blanket. Board games don't exist, and storytelling is done in place, with everyone listening intently and shuffling closer to the fire whenever the storyteller looks away. All this leads to a certain camaraderie born of shared suffering and creative avoidance. You and your family develop a silent communication, pointing, eyebrow-waggling, exaggerated sighs to get things done with minimal movement. You become experts at conserving energy, preserving warmth, and, above all, staying put. So next time you groan about a quick dash to the mailbox or complain about chilly tile floors, picture your medieval alter ego refusing to budge, eyes locked on the fire, and quietly hoping someone else gets up first. In winter, motion is for the reckless. The wise know that survival means sitting very, very still. Dinner is hearty, heavy, and designed to stick to your ribs until morning. Lots of root vegetables, beans, maybe some old bacon if you're lucky. The more you eat, the warmer you'll feel, eventually. At least until the turnips revolt. Medieval winter cuisine is built around one central principle: bulk. You're not eating for pleasure, you're eating for survival. Forget 3 course meal or a balanced plate. The evening feast is more like a group project involving a single, battered cauldron and whatever ingredients haven't frozen solid or been chewed on by a passing mouse. The centerpiece of the meal is always the stew, lovingly referred to as perpetual pottage. This culinary marvel has been simmering for days, sometimes weeks, over the fire. It's less of a recipe and more of a lifestyle. A living ecosystem of yesterday's carrots, today's turnips, tomorrow's hope, and a bone or two that's been boiled into submission. Every family member takes turns tossing something in: a wrinkled parsnip, a handful of beans, a suspiciously chewy chunk of last autumn's bacon. It's never quite the same stew twice. And honestly, it's better not to ask what that new flavor is. Alongside the stew, there's porridge, oats, barley, or rye, boiled with water or weak ale until it becomes a thick, grey paste that might just hold your house together if you slathered it on the walls. You eat it because you have to. With enough onions, salt, and wishful thinking, it's almost edible. Almost. Bread is the universal side dish, assuming you still have any left after the rats have helped themselves. It's tough, dense, and occasionally doubles as a doorstop or an improvised weapon. You tear off a chunk, dip it in the stew, and chew for approximately 3 minutes per bite. Teeth are optional, and jaw strength is a necessity. If you get a fresh loaf, you savor the moment. If it's stale, you soak it and pretend it's rustic. As for meat, it's a treat. Bacon rinds and old sausage bits are dropped into the pot for flavor. But the real stars are root vegetables: turnips, beets, carrots, and anything else you manage to pull from the dirt before the ground froze. Beans make a regular appearance, both as protein and as tomorrow morning's not-so-subtle reminder that beans are, in fact, a two-edged sword. Let's not forget seasoning. Salt is valuable, sometimes literally worth its weight in silver. So most food is seasoned with hope, the occasional herb, and the smoky essence of firewood. If a traveling peddler sold you a pinch of pepper or a dried bay leaf, you guard it like treasure and deploy it only on feast days. The meal is sacred for reasons that go far beyond taste. It's the one time everyone gathers close, bowls in hand, steam rising into faces that have weathered another brutal day. Conversation drifts from the weather, still cold, to complaints about the stew, still mostly turnip, to gentle reminders about who's on fire banking duty tonight. Laughter comes easier when the air is thick with warmth, both literal and emotional. Sometimes, someone tells a story or sings a song, and for a brief moment, the hard edges of winter soften. Of course, dinner is also a gamble. Will it stick with you through the night, warming your belly as you sleep, or will the turnips rebel at midnight, prompting an emergency dash to the chamber pot and a new family legend? Only time will tell. So next time you sigh over leftovers or roll your eyes at another bowl of oatmeal, remember, for your medieval ancestors, a belly full of something, anything, meant another chance to survive till morning. The sacred evening meal, not fancy, but fiercely important, and sometimes, just sometimes, genuinely delicious. No heated blankets, no problem. Heat a rock in the fire, wrap it in a rag, and throw it in your bed. Or put your dinner in a hay box to keep it warm. Both are fire hazards. Both are worth it. Welcome to the cutting edge of medieval home comfort, where your choices for fighting the cold come down to whatever you can heat up without burning the house down. If you've ever felt smug with your heated mattress pad or your smart thermostat, just remember your ancestors were out here wrestling with rocks, hay, and the perpetual threat of open flame, sometimes all at once. Let's start with the hot stone. Every evening, as the fire burns low, someone with sturdy gloves, or just very thick calluses, selects a rock from the ever-present pile by the hearth. Not just any rock, this is a family heirloom, smooth and round, chosen for its thermal mass and lack of sharp edges. The rock is rolled into the heart of the coals and left there to soak up every last bit of medieval heat. Once it's red hot, or more realistically just warm enough not to induce frostbite, the operation gets risky. With the dexterity of a medieval ninja, you pluck it out using tongs, a stick, or a handy piece of leather. The rock is then bundled into a rag, which hopefully isn't also your best shirt, and hurried to bed. You drop it between the straw and blankets. Careful not to let it touch bare skin unless you want a branded reminder of winter 1347. As you climb into bed, you feel that delicious, fleeting pocket of warmth, like a hug from someone who's about to steal your shoes. For a brief, glorious hour, your feet are almost toasty. Of course, by morning, the stone is colder than your neighbor's heart and twice as hard, but it's still better than nothing. Plus, the possibility of burning down the house keeps things exciting. Then there's the hay box. Forget slow cookers and insulated mugs. This is the original medieval thermal tech. You take a wooden box, line it with hay, and nestle your pot of stew or porridge inside after it's been brought to a boil. The hay traps the heat, gently cooking your dinner for hours without needing another stick of firewood. It's not just a meal saver, it's a morale booster. Hot food in winter is a miracle, even if it comes with the faint flavor of barnyard. Of course, there are downsides. Hay is highly flammable, as anyone who's ever knocked over a candle can attest. More than one medieval feast has ended with frantic bucket brigades and a newly discovered open floor plan. If you're lucky, you just get dinner that tastes like toasted grass. If you're not, you get a good story. And maybe a new door where the wall used to be. Sometimes, people get really creative. Stones heated by the fire are used to warm shoes, dry laundry, or even ease aches and pains, assuming you can wrestle one away from the family dog. A well-placed hot stone is a medieval heating pad. A luxury so coveted you might need to sleep with one eye open to keep your siblings from swiping it. There's an unspoken competition in every house. Who can come up with the best hack for surviving another night? Maybe it's a double-wrapped stone. Maybe it's a hay box insulated with an old cloak. Or maybe it's just the clever use of every scrap of leftover wool. Either way, ingenuity is your best defense. So the next time you set your thermostat to tropical and snuggle up with your electric blanket, spare a grateful thought for your medieval counterparts, stoking fires, juggling rocks, and hoping their haybox dinner doesn't turn into an accidental bonfire. Because in a world without modern comforts, you do what you can, take your chances, and always check that your bed isn't smoldering before you drift off to sleep. You patch up your home with moss, straw, dung, and anything else you can find. Winter is an endless battle against sneaky gusts. Sometimes you're pretty sure the wind is just personally out to get you. In the great medieval struggle against the cold, drafts are your oldest enemy and also your most creative nemesis. No matter how many layers you put on or how big a fire you build, there's always one tiny crack in the wall letting in an Arctic breeze directly onto your neck. Your home is less a fortress and more a sieve, designed, it seems, by someone who thought airflow was a competitive sport. Let's start with the basics. Insulation is a modern luxury, and weatherproofing in your world means grabbing whatever's nearby and jamming it into any suspicious gap. If you spot a hole, you don't call for repairs. You grab a handful of moss, a wad of old rags, or a strategically chosen clump of sheep dung and cram it in with the determination of someone who's not going to lose another toe this winter. Moss is a crowd favorite, soft and just absorbent enough to double as a draft blocker and emergency towel. The family's entire supply of spare clothing, old tunics, socks with holes, the remains of last year's pillow, gets repurposed into insulation. Anything cloth becomes fair game. Grandma's petticoat? Now it's plugging the gap above the window. Dad's once prized cap? Tucked around the door frame, where the wind likes to whistle at night. If it's soft, it gets stuffed. If it's hard, it gets wedged. You don't even ask permission anymore. Survival comes before sentimentality. Dung, while not glamorous, is the unsung hero of draft dodging. Mixed with straw, It's slathered into cracks like medieval cork. When it dries, it forms a surprisingly solid plug. It also offers a certain earthy aroma, one that blends seamlessly with the rest of your home's winter perfume. In a good year, you don't notice the smell after a while. In a bad year, you just pretend it's the new scent of resilience. And then there's the window, if you can call it that. It's really just a hole with a flap of oiled cloth, or maybe a scrap of old parchment that's more see-through than insulating. On the coldest nights, you stack wooden boards, extra moss, and anything else you can find, all while praying you don't accidentally block out what little daylight creeps through in winter. Some families even stack up firewood or barrels against the outside walls for extra insulation, which is less effective than it sounds but makes you feel like you're doing something heroic. Every night before bed, there's a family ritual, the draft check. Everyone circles the room, holding their hands out to feel for cold air and shouting out new leaks like they're calling out bingo numbers. Patching is a group project, and arguments are frequent. That's not a draft, that's just the cat, someone insists. But no one wants to be the one who wakes up with frostbite, so the debate continues until someone runs out of patience or stuffing material. But the drafts are persistent. You swear the wind changes direction just to find the one hole you missed. It rattles the shutters, lifts the edge of your carefully placed moss, and laughs as it sneaks straight into your ear at 3 a.m. Sometimes, you half expect to hear it whisper, "Nice try." Still, you keep fighting. Every new patch, every wadded-up rag, every inventive use of farm waste is a tiny victory in the never-ending war against winter's mischief. And when the storm howls and your teeth stop chattering just long enough for you to fall asleep, you know you've done all you can until tomorrow when the battle begins again. So next time you complain about a drafty window, imagine stuffing it with moss, dung, and medieval optimism. Because in those days, do-it-yourself really meant do whatever it takes. Someone always has to stay up, poking the fire and glaring at the embers. Sleeping in shifts is a survival necessity, and a test of who can grumble the quietest without being volunteered. Let's be honest. In the medieval winter, nobody really wants the night watch, but everybody knows the stakes. If the fire goes out, you don't just lose a little comfort. You risk waking up to a room colder than a tax, collector's heart, with a side of hypothermia and an extra helping of family resentment. The solution? Divide the night into shifts and hope you're not the one on duty when the fire decides to play dead. Of course, there's an art to not getting picked for fire duty. The seasoned pros know how to blend in with the straw, feign the deepest, most convincing sleep, or, if desperate, launch into a tale about their lingering cough. "You wouldn't want me coughing on the embers, would you?" they protest, voice thick with theatrical wheezing. But someone has to lose, and usually it's the youngest, the most gullible, or the one whose bladder betrayed them with a midnight trip to the chamber pot. If it's your shift, you wrap yourself in every available blanket, cloak, and emotional layer. You position yourself next to the hearth, knees tucked up, eyes fixed on the fire as if sheer force of will can keep the coals burning. Your main tool is a fire poker that's seen more action than the village blacksmith's anvil. Poke the logs, shift the ash, and pray you don't accidentally scatter sparks into the straw mattress. The job is deceptively dull and endlessly nerve-wracking. Your only entertainment is the dance of the flames, the occasional snort from the goat, and the low chorus of snoring from the family pile. Every few minutes you lean in, squint at the embers, and debate if it's time to add another stick. Add it too soon, and you'll run out of wood before dawn. Wait too long, and you might have to explain to your mother why everyone's breakfast is going to be served ice cold. Every house develops its own system. Maybe it's an hour-by-hour rotation, Maybe it's whoever's up. Stay up. Or maybe it's pure chaos and desperate finger-pointing. But there's one universal rule. Never, ever trust Uncle Raymond to take a shift. He falls asleep faster than the fire goes out, and last winter's incident with the singed eyebrows is still a family punchline. Despite all the grumbling, there's a strange sense of pride in being the sentry. You're the silent guardian, the one person awake, while everyone else dreams of warm summers and edible bread. There's a certain peace in the solitude. The kind that comes only when you realize you're the only thing standing between your loved ones and a night of medieval misery. Plus, you get first dibs on any secret snacks hidden by the fire, as long as the dog doesn't beat you to it. And when your shift is finally over, you wake the next victim. Volunteer. With a gentle nudge, or a not-so-gentle shove, crawl back into the heap and immediately start shivering as your body reacquaints itself with the ambient temperature of barely above freezing. By the time dawn creeps through the cracks and the first brave soul stirs, everyone acts as if they've slept like royalty. In reality, the entire night was a relay race of groggy, reluctant firekeepers, ensuring the flame never died. So, if you ever find yourself complaining about having to get up for a midnight snack or letting the dog out, remember your medieval ancestors, shivering by the hearth, poking coals, and perfecting the art of complaining just quietly enough to avoid another shift. Because when winter comes, the true heroes are the ones with the warmest toes and the smokiest cloaks. You learn to breathe shallowly through your nose under a patch of cloth. It's the closest thing to a health tip you'll get. Open-mouthed gasping is strictly for the recently deceased. In the medieval winter, even your breathing has to be strategic. Every exhale is a tiny escape of warmth, and every inhale is an invitation for the cold to take up residence in your lungs. Forget about deep, cleansing breaths. Those are for yoga retreats and people with central heating. Your daily routine revolves around conserving body heat at all costs. And that starts with how you draw your next breath. It's not just about warmth. The air in your one-room home is a unique blend of smoke, animal funk, and the ghosts of every turnip ever boiled in your stew pot. You can practically taste the flavor of barnyard chic on the tip of your tongue. If you dare to inhale too deeply, you might learn more than you ever wanted to know about what your family had for dinner, what the cow's been up to, or how many candles you actually burned last night. Nose breathing, then, becomes your lifeline. The air is at least partially filtered by your trusty patch of cloth. Maybe a rag tied across your mouth. Maybe just the end of your sleeve. Maybe, in desperate moments, the hem of your own tunic. Some claim this trick was passed down by grandmothers who survived a dozen winters and at least as many bouts of mysterious coughing. The cloth traps warmth, humidity, and, sometimes, the lingering stench of garlic. It's a low-tech mask, centuries ahead of its time, and the only fashion statement that matters when the wind's howling outside. Open-mouth breathing? Absolutely forbidden. Not just because you'll wake up with a mouth drier than last year's hard bread, but because it signals defeat. Only the youngest children and the truly ill resort to open-mouthed panting. And even then, someone usually rushes over with a rag and a whispered reminder to breathe proper, or you'll freeze your teeth off. There's always that one uncle who claims he hasn't breathed through his mouth since the blizzard of 27, and he's proud to remind everyone, loudly, every night. Of course, shallow breathing comes with its own set of hazards. You try to take in as little as possible, especially if you're sitting near the animals, who have no concept of personal space or boundaries. A goat's breath in your face is an aggressive, aromatic experience that no amount of shallow inhaling can fully block. If you have a cold, congratulations, now you're just marinating in your own misery. Sometimes, on especially brutal nights, the whole family looks like a gang of medieval outlaws, faces half-covered, eyes peeking out over layers of rag, blanket, and desperation. You exchange glances that say, "Yes, I see you." "No, I don't want to smell you." Even the dog gets into the act, tucking his nose under a paw or someone's cloak for maximum insulation. Breathing becomes a silent, communal effort. Everyone moves a little less, talks a little quieter, and, above all, exhales through the nose. Grandparents swear that this is how they made it through their childhood winters. And while you suspect they might be exaggerating, you're not about to take chances. After all, every bit of advice counts when your bedroom temperature could double as a walk-in freezer. So tonight, as you pull your blanket up over your nose and try not to inhale anything you'll regret, give yourself credit for surviving another medieval night. Because sometimes, the difference between comfort and calamity is just a single shallow breath. And if you do catch yourself gasping, just remember, it's not just the cold that'll get you. It's the judgment from 3 generations of nose-breathing experts, plus 1 goat. Stew is your life. Cooking is both survival and social hour. Women keep the pot simmering, adding scraps, peeling turnips, and sometimes, on wild nights, actual spices. The medieval kitchen is not a place for picky eaters or anyone with a strong sense of smell. There's no such thing as a quick meal or takeout. Every meal is an ongoing experiment, equal parts alchemy, endurance, and wishful thinking. If it can be boiled, roasted, or mildly threatened into edibility, it goes in the pot. The heart of your culinary empire is a battered cauldron suspended over the hearth. The perpetual stew is a family heirloom in liquid form. Every day, new ingredients are tossed in: bits of carrot, the stub of a parsnip, a strip of last autumn's bacon, half a turnip gnawed by a mouse. Just cut off the chewed part, it's fine. The result? A dish with more layers than your winter wardrobe and a flavor profile best described as adventurous. Cooking in winter is also an act of community. The whole household gathers round while you chop, stir, and sniff suspiciously at whatever someone just contributed. It's a chance to swap stories, pass down family legends, and judge each other's chopping technique. There's no private chef here. Everyone is a sous chef. Willingly or not, if you can wield a knife, you're on turnip duty. If not, you're peeling onions until you cry, which doubles as a great excuse to complain about your lot in life. On rare and glorious days, someone unearths a dried herb from last summer's garden or a shriveled apple from the cellar. The announcement alone is enough to turn dinner into a feast. Spices are the holy grail, acquired through mysterious barters or pilfered from the Lord's kitchen. When you finally get to toss in a pinch of sage or a speck of pepper, you savor the collective gasp of anticipation. Everyone knows tonight's stew will be legendary, or at least slightly less beige. Bread, when you have it, completes the meal. It's dense, crusty, and doubles as both a utensil and a test of dental fortitude. You scrape the last dregs of stew with your chunk of bread, and if it falls apart, you just fish it out and call it soaked. Every crumb counts. Of course, not everything is edible, and sometimes the pot serves up more drama than nourishment. Maybe it's the night you discover a beetle in the beans, or the day the family dog snatches a sausage right off the table. No one is safe from culinary chaos. Sometimes, the biggest excitement is whether the stew will be thick enough to eat with a spoon, or if you'll need a fork and a prayer. Despite the endless repetition, meal prep is a lifeline. It gives structure to the day and a reason to gather, grumble, and laugh. For women especially, it's an arena of subtle power, deciding what goes in the pot, who gets the biggest ladleful, and how to stretch 2 carrots into a meal for 8. You learn to measure time by the simmering stew and gauge the day's success by how many bowls are scraped clean. Even the cleanup is communal. After everyone eats, you scrape the cauldron, add a bit more water, and start the process over again. Tomorrow's meal is already brewing. Leftovers? Everything is a leftover, and nothing ever goes to waste, unless it walks away on its own, which happens more often than you'd like to admit. So the next time you order delivery or grumble about reheating leftovers, picture your medieval counterpart, elbow deep in turnip peels, stirring a bubbling pot and finding joy in every scrap, story, and shared meal. Because in a world where so much is uncertain, the ritual of cooking together keeps you fed, warm, and, against all odds, a little bit sane. When things get desperate, the whole village steps in. If a neighbor's fire goes out, you invite them over. Warmth is a communal project, and so is not freezing to death. In the medieval winter, nobody survives alone. Your house is drafty, your blanket is more holes than fabric, and your best chance of making it to spring is the same as everyone else's. Teamwork. This is especially true for women, who are the silent conductors of the village survival orchestra. They know which family is running low on firewood, who needs help patching up a leaking roof, and which neighbor is borrowing moss for the third time this week. Every crisis is an opportunity for the village to band together, if not for love, then at least out of mutual exasperation. The rules of hospitality are unspoken but ironclad. If someone's hearth goes out and they knock at your door, you don't leave them shivering on the threshold. You wave them in, nudge someone over, and make room for another chilly body around the fire. If you have an extra hunk of bread or a pot of stew bubbling, you share it, knowing that next week it might be your turn to seek warmth and a hot meal somewhere else. Women are the architects of this unspoken safety net. They're the ones organizing firewood runs, passing along scraps of cloth for patching windows, or brewing an extra pot of herbal tea for the neighbor with the perpetual sniffles. When times get especially rough, the village women hold informal gatherings, sometimes called spin-ins or men nights, where everyone brings something to fix, something to cook, or, if all else fails, a really good story. There, in the flickering firelight, the latest news and gossip are traded right alongside tips for making your turnip stew taste less like despair. Children benefit from this communal approach too. On icy days, they're herded into the warmest house, bundled together with cousins, neighbors, and whatever livestock is invited in for the group huddle. If one mother needs to run outside for wood or water, someone else will keep an eye on her little ones. No one asks. It's simply understood. In the medieval winter, everyone is a babysitter. Everyone is a lifeguard on the frozen sea of survival. Generosity and resourcefulness go hand in hand. Need an extra blanket? Someone will dig one up, even if it means borrowing it from a family member who's not using it anyway. Running out of candles? There's always a clever neighbor who knows how to make them from leftover tallow, and will teach you for a slice of bread and a sympathetic ear. Sometimes, this spirit of cooperation is the only thing standing between the village and real tragedy. If someone falls sick, women organize rotating shifts to bring food, keep the fire going, and handle chores. The men may bring in the heavy logs or patch a roof, but it's the women who make sure the soup is hot and no one is left alone in the cold. And when the winter finally starts to thaw, it's the community that celebrates together. There's a collective sense of pride, relief, and just a little bit of disbelief that everyone made it through yet another season of frost, famine, and livestock negotiations. So, if you ever wonder how medieval villages survived when every winter threatened to freeze them solid, remember, it was the women who wove warmth from thin air and goodwill. They stitched together a patchwork of kindness and grit, ensuring that no one ever faced the cold alone. In the end, it's not just about survival, it's about surviving together, one shared fire at a time. Every night, you mutter prayers for warmth and luck, You sprinkle holy water on the hearth, hang charms over the door, and make deals with any saint who's listening. In the medieval winter, when your home is draftier than your tax records, and every creak in the night could be the sound of a toe turning to ice, you cling to more than just blankets. Faith, folklore, and superstition fill in the gaps left by science and central heating. The tools for survival aren't just wood and wool, they're blessings, rituals, and a healthy dose of just in case. You start with prayer. Every evening, before crawling into the communal heap, you appeal to Saint Bridget, patron of hearth and home, and Saint Blaise, who, legend has it, can cure a sore throat or possibly keep your nose from falling off. You ask Saint Anthony to look after the family goat, Saint Nicholas to protect the children, and Saint Jude for when things are truly desperate, like when the last candle burns out. It's less about theology and more about hedging your bets. The more saints in your corner, the better. But prayer isn't enough. You have rituals too. A sprig of rosemary hung above the hearth, said to keep the evil frost spirits away. A scrap of red cloth over the door, for luck. Some families tuck an iron nail under the mattress to ward off nightmares and encourage warmth, because obviously, the reason you're freezing is the lack of proper metal in your bedding. Holy water is splashed on everything. The fire, the children, the cow, the dinner stew. You're not taking any chances. The more pious relatives make the sign of the cross over the hearth, just in case Saint Eligius, patron of blacksmiths and by extension anyone who likes fire, is listening. Old wives' tales abound. Never sweep the ashes after sunset. You'll sweep away your luck. Never leave your shoes upside down. Invites bad spirits and cold feet. And never, under any circumstances, whistle indoors or the wind will answer. Folklore takes over when faith feels slow. There's always a neighbor who swears by her secret for keeping frostbite away, rubbing goose fat on your feet, or tying a sprig of holly around your ankle. Someone else insists you should place a bowl of milk on the doorstep for the house elves, lest they decide to play tricks and let all the heat out in the middle of the night. Skeptics mutter about old nonsense, but even they find themselves hanging a horseshoe over the door just in case. The winter nights themselves are alive with stories of frost giants and mischievous sprites, of spirits that slip in with the wind, and of brave ancestors who survived the coldest years by listening to the whispers of the fire. Children huddle close as the tales are told, wide-eyed and grateful for the protection of charm and chant. The line between what we believe and what we hope is as thin as the layer of moss stuffed in the window cracks. Some nights, you wonder if any of it works, or if it's just another way to feel like you have some control over the elements. But when you wake to find the fire still smouldering, your family huddled close and whole, and your toes still attached, you whisper a quiet thanks to anyone who might be listening, just in case. Because in the end, surviving winter in the Middle Ages is as much about faith and folklore as it is about wood and wool. Every little ritual, every muttered prayer, every charm tacked above the door is a stand against the darkness, a plea for just one more warm, safe night. And in a world where the cold is always one mistake away, hope, no matter how superstitious, is the warmest thing you have. Sometimes, no matter what you do, the cold takes someone. Women are the ones who mourn, who care for the sick, who survive, and who remember, come spring, everyone who didn't. Winter in the medieval world isn't just a background challenge. It's an annual test that sometimes takes more than anyone is willing to give. The battle for warmth, health, and survival is relentless. And despite every clever trick, hot stones, hay boxes, saintly prayers, and enough layers to dress a small army, sometimes the frost simply wins. It usually begins quietly. A cough that doesn't go away. A neighbor who hasn't left their house in days. An elderly relative who moves a little slower, eats a little less, shivers a little more. The signs are subtle but familiar. The women of the household, the unofficial first responders, notice it first. They press warm cloths to fevered brows, brew endless pots of weak herbal tea, and try to coax the sick to eat, to drink, to stay. Hope hangs on every improvement. Dread lingers in every setback. When someone grows too weak to rise from the straw mattress, the women move into a rhythm that's as old as the winter itself. They take turns sitting up through the coldest nights, spooning broth into cracked lips, holding hands, whispering prayers, and doing their best to block the wind from where it cuts the worst. There's no hospital to call, no doctor to summon, just a midwife with a bag of hope, some herbs, and more experience with loss than anyone should have. Children are shielded from the worst of it, ushered away to neighbours, distracted with stories and chores, while the adults huddle near the sickbed. Still, they know something is wrong. The house feels heavier, quieter, every sound muffled by fear and the occasional stifled sob. There's a communal understanding. If one family falters, the whole village feels it. Meals are left on doorsteps, wood is stacked outside, prayers are whispered in every home, and sometimes, despite it all, there's nothing left to do but watch the breath slow, then stop. There's no gentle way to say goodbye when you're all just one bad winter away from the same fate. The ritual of mourning begins immediately. The body is washed and wrapped with care, usually by the women, while the men trudge out into the frozen earth to dig a grave. The village gathers for a simple ceremony. The priest recites well-worn words, and everyone stands together in the cold, united by loss and by the memory of every other winter's casualties. But grief, in the medieval winter, is never just about sorrow. There's laughter too, stories of the departed, retold around the hearth, reminders of the time they slipped in the mud, or won the spring dance, or once traded a prized egg for a kiss. Memories are preserved with humour as much as with tears. In this way, the dead stay warm in the hearts of the living. Women bear the brunt and the burden of remembrance. They're the ones who stitch together life after loss, who keep the household running, who hold everyone close and quietly mark another tally in the ledger of survival. Spring, when it comes, is bittersweet, a relief from danger, but also a reminder of who's missing. Flowers bloom on fresh graves, and the village carries on just a little changed. Still, the resilience remains. Each year's losses are woven into the fabric of the community, making every smile in summer, every laugh at the market, every noisy festival in the square a small act of defiance against the long, hard winter. Because in the end, survival isn't just about living through the cold. It's about carrying forward, honoring those lost, and stubbornly choosing hope again, no matter how many times the frost comes calling. Frozen toes, numb fingers, and empty stomachs are all part of winter's cost. Survival isn't guaranteed. It's earned, year after year. If you make it to spring, you're a legend. There's a reason nobody in the medieval village greets February with a smile. Winter is less a season and more a gladiatorial contest. And every year, it claims its share of losers, your opponent. The cold, the hunger, and the quiet, gnawing uncertainty that hovers just behind every howling wind. Let's start with frostbite. The word itself isn't in your vocabulary, but the experience is as familiar as breathing through a scarf. You know you're in trouble when your feet go from cold to numb, to maybe I should check if I still have toes. Medieval medical advice runs the gamut from rub snow on it to sacrifice a chicken and try not to think about it. Most people just wrap another scrap of wool around the affected limb and hope for the best. Because the only local cure involves time, prayer, and possibly the village wise woman muttering incantations as she waves a goose feather in your direction. Every household has a story. Cousin Peter, who lost a pinky toe one January, or old martyr who wears so many layers, she waddles like a duck, but still manages to get frostbitten ears. Children are threatened with tales of the wandering frost, a mythic force that steals the digits of anyone foolish enough to venture outside without proper layers. Parents check on their sleeping children's noses and ears, sometimes prodding them awake just to make sure the tips are still attached. Then there's famine, a recurring character in the medieval calendar. Winter's pantry is a lesson in making do. You scrape the bottom of the grain barrel, ration out the last of the beans, and invent new ways to cook turnips that won't make everyone cry. There's the 3-root stew, boiled turnip surprise, and, on desperate days, let's just drink hot water and pretend. Sometimes, the only thing standing between your family and starvation is whatever you manage to dry, salt, or hide from the neighbor's goats back in September. The hungriest days are known as starvation time. It's not poetic. It's just true. The first sign is when people start eyeing the livestock with a look that's both hungry and guilty. Chickens are spared as long as possible for their eggs. But there comes a point in every truly hard winter when someone gets volunteered for special dinner. No one talks about it. Everyone remembers it. Hunger does strange things to a village. People grow quieter, tempers fray, and suddenly, the priest's stories about the virtue of sacrifice start to sound less like sermons and more like terrible dinner suggestions. But there's humor too. Gallows humor, certainly, but enough to get you through. You joke about losing weight for summer, or swapping your last hunk of bread for a spoonful of someone else's stew. If you have a little, you share a little. If you have nothing, you offer company and warmth. And yet, spring always feels miraculous. The snow melts, the first green shoots poke through the mud, and you suddenly remember what hope tastes like. Survivors, especially the oldest women, are quietly celebrated. The winter legends, people call them. Not because they did anything grand, but because they endured. They kept the fire burning, stretched every meal, watched over the children, and coaxed laughter out of empty bellies. So the next time you scrape ice off your windshield or grumble about skipping lunch, spare a thought for your medieval ancestors, facing frostbite, famine, and the possibility that this winter might be their last. If you made it to spring, you didn't just survive. You conquered the cold, the hunger, and the odds. That makes you a legend in any century. When the thaw comes, it's a party. You open the windows, throw out the worst straw, and finally wash your tunic. The misery melts, and life feels possible again. Until next winter, anyway. Spring in medieval Europe is not just a change of season, it's a full-blown, joy-filled emotional recovery. After months of huddling around the hearth, rationing the last of the beans, and perfecting the art of sleeping in a human and livestock pile, the first warm breeze through the window feels like a miracle. Suddenly, the sun peeks out, and everyone in the village looks 10 years younger, or at least slightly less blue. You emerge from your home with the energy of someone who's just won the lottery. Only instead of a pile of gold coins, you've scored a patch of mud that isn't frozen solid. You step outside, feel the earth under your feet, and breathe deep. No scarf, no rag, just air that doesn't hurt. Even the dog is celebrating, running in dizzy circles and barking at absolutely nothing. Spring cleaning isn't optional. It's survival. Out go the layers of filthy straw that have served as your mattress, insulation, and accidental salad bar for half the winter's rodents. The bad straw, and let's be honest, it's all bad at this point, is flung into the yard with wild abandon. Children turn it into games. Adults see it as a cathartic purge. And every passing chicken sees an opportunity. The house is aired out for the first time in months, and sure, It now smells like wet moss and panic. But at least it's not winter. Bathing makes a dramatic comeback. You haul out your tunic, which by now can stand up on its own and probably remembers when the king was a child. The first wash is less spa day and more archaeological dig. You scrub, you soak, and you marvel at how water can turn colours you've never seen before. For one glorious afternoon, you and everyone else in the village are slightly less sticky than usual. Meals improve overnight. Fresh greens poke through the thawing earth, and suddenly there's something to eat that isn't a root vegetable. The first wild herbs are celebrated like lost friends. You chop wild garlic into everything, not because it's fancy, but because it's the only flavour your tongue still recognizes. Someone catches a fish, and it's treated like a visit from royalty. Even the bread seems to rise higher, now that the air is less likely to freeze it halfway through baking. The animals rejoice too. The goats leap about. The cows get back to grazing. And the chickens, well, they go back to being chickens, but they're doing it with attitude. The great migration from hearth to pasture is a parade, with more drama than most medieval weddings. Everyone and everything is itching for sunshine, freedom, and the chance to sleep without waking up to the sound of icicles falling from the rafters. Best of all, spirits soar. Laughter comes easier. Singing returns to the evenings. And the neighbours are less likely to snap at each other over who stole the last piece of stale bread. Birthdays are counted, not just for age, but as another year survived. Old stories are dusted off, new plans are made, and, despite the knowledge that another winter will eventually come, hope stretches out as far as the greening fields. So as the great thaw transforms the world outside your window, remember, for the medieval survivor, spring isn't just about flowers and sunshine. It's about gratitude, renewal, and a deep, hard-won joy at simply not being cold. You made it through, you cleaned your tunic, and for a little while at least, life feels possible again. Once a month, you're hit with a medieval challenge no man has ever written a ballad about, keeping your dignity intact during your period. No pads, no tampons, just scraps of old linen washed in icy water and hope. Privacy? Forget it. Your only sanctuary is pretending nothing's happening while wishing for a time machine and some ibuprofen. Welcome to the medieval menstrual marathon, where your monthly visitor is met not with a basket of self-care products, but with a resigned sigh and a mental inventory of every linen scrap that hasn't been used to plug a draft. You stash your supplies, if you can call on them that, in a small wooden box or tied up in a rag, hidden in the least trafficked corner of your one-room home, always praying nobody mistakes your secret stash for a potholder or, worse, emergency nose rag. Your options are limited. No ultra-thin, overnight, with wings here. Your best bet is to fold, twist, and layer strips of ancient linen, holding them in place with a bit of skill, some prayer, and a truly impressive ability to act like everything's normal. Some women use soft moss, some experiment with wool, and a brave few try nothing at all. There are whispered tales about using rabbit fur, and you briefly consider it, but decide against starting a feud with the local wildlife. Laundry is a covert operation. You rinse your linens in icy water when nobody's looking, usually after dark, using more muscle than a medieval blacksmith. Your hands freeze, your teeth chatter, but the alternative is waiting for the next rainstorm and hoping the river will do the job for you. You hang the linens up to dry in a discreet spot, which of course everyone notices immediately, prompting smirks, side eyes, and the occasional helpful suggestion from someone who has no idea what you're dealing with. Of course, the fun doesn't end there. Pain relief is a distant dream. There's no chocolate, no heating pad, and definitely no gentle words of encouragement. You rely on herbal teas brewed from whatever you can find in the garden, most of which taste like boiled dirt and offer about as much relief. Some women swear by warm compresses, but since warmth is as rare as personal space, you settle for sitting as close to the hearth as you can without setting yourself on fire. Privacy is a cruel joke. With everyone packed into the same room, your only real option is to keep your head down and your temper in check. The menfolk don't ask questions, and if they do, they're quickly shut down by the oldest woman in the house. One sharp look says it all. If you're especially unlucky, your period coincides with laundry day, visitors, or, worst of all, the monthly village gathering, forcing you to smile, make small talk, and pretend you're not thinking about the laundry you'll have to do later. And let's talk about leaks. They happen. You learn to wear your darkest skirt, move carefully, and keep your back to the wall. If an accident happens, you sigh, grab another linen scrap, and tell yourself that at least everyone's equally distracted by the cold and the chaos. Humor helps. Women whisper jokes, swap stories, and support each other in the knowledge that some challenges are best faced together, with a sense of solidarity, and, if you're lucky, an extra scrap of cloth. So the next time you hear someone wax poetic about the simple life or returning to nature, remember the unsung medieval heroine, armed with nothing but linen, grit, and a remarkable sense of humor, surviving each month in a world that barely acknowledged she existed. Dignity is in short supply, but so is complaint, because if you can get through medieval menstruation, you can get through anything. Every medieval woman rocks a headscarf, not because it's cute, but because it keeps the wind from turning your ears into icicles. The thicker the better. And if it hides a bad hair day, or the 3 mice living in your braid, so much the better. Plus, you can always blame your neighbor's goat for the mysterious crunching sound. Step outside in winter without a head covering, and you'll immediately understand why every woman, from the lowest peasant to the fanciest manor lady, wraps up like a human turnip. It's not about modesty, fashion, or even following the latest decree from the parish priest. It's about sheer, desperate survival. The medieval wind doesn't just nip at your ears, it launches a full-scale assault on anything exposed, and by January, you'd gladly wear a sack on your head if it kept you from waking up with icicles in your hair. Let's talk headscarf strategy. The choices are endless: wool, linen, old rags, or the sleeve you just tore off your least favorite tunic. You twist, fold, and double layer for maximum coverage. On the coldest mornings, you pile on 2 or 3, looking less like a picturesque milkmaid and more like a disgruntled onion. Style points are earned for keeping everything in place with a single, heroic knot or a complicated wrap that would impress even the most intimidating church matron. Headscarves aren't just for show, they're a full-body defense system. Pull one low enough, and it doubles as a face mask, cutting the sting of sleet and snow. Wrap it wide, and you can tuck your entire braid, and anything living in it, safely away from view. A good scarf keeps warmth in and gossip out. It's the medieval version of headphones. Signal to the world that you're busy, cold, and not interested in hearing about how Martha's goat escaped again. Bad hair days are the norm. Shampoo is for nobles, brushes are shared with the dog, and lice combs are coveted family heirlooms. Under the headscarf, anything goes: greasy plates, broken ribbons, wild curls, even the occasional twig. In fact, the real reason for the scarf might be less about wind protection and more about hiding the evidence of your last wrestling match with the bedding. And then there are the added perks. A headscarf is a portable towel, pot holder, or, when the baby spits up for the 3rd time before breakfast, a lifesaver. If you need to haul firewood or chase chickens, you can tie the scarf back and keep your hair, mostly, out of your eyes. When the wind is especially brutal, you can wrap it around your face until only your eyes peek out. blinking at the snow and plotting revenge against the season. The scarf also comes with a social code. Certain patterns or colors might hint at your marital status, the village you hail from, or the fact that you lost a bet with your sister and now have to wear the plaid monstrosity for a week. But the real sign of a seasoned medieval woman is how fast she can spot a good piece of cloth, snatch it up before the kids or the goat get to it, and turn it into 5 different types of head covering. And of course, there's always the goat. Any mysterious rustling or unexplained crunching sound from atop your head can be blamed on that ever-hungry animal. If you catch someone giving your headscarf a sidelong glance, just shrug and mutter, "Goat got into the straw again." It's the medieval equivalent of bad hair day. Nobody asks questions. Everyone understands. So next time you reach for a cozy beanie or wrap up in a chic scarf, remember your medieval ancestors layered, bundled, and quietly winning the war against the wind with nothing but determination, resourcefulness, and the occasional accidental hitchhiker in their hair. Because in winter, it's not about looking good. It's about keeping your ears, your dignity, and your secrets safe under as many layers as it takes. If you think parenting today is tough, try keeping 5 toddlers and an infant from licking icicles off a moldy wall. Medieval mothers invent games like find the warmest spot and let's all pretend to sleep so we don't have to get up. No iPads. Just a stern look, a pile of straw, and the constant dread that little Timmy's feet have turned blue. Again, welcome to the ultimate winter parenting challenge, where the main objective is don't let the kids freeze. Forget carpool, soccer practice, and hand sanitizer. Your daily goals revolve around preventing frostbite, finding enough food, and making sure no one sneaks out the door in search of adventure, or, more likely, a slightly warmer barn. Medieval childcare in the cold months is less about enrichment activities and more about basic survival, and a lot of creativity. The first rule of winter parenting: keep them close. Really close. The family pile isn't just for warmth, it's a tactical move. A stray child is a cold child, and a cold child is a loud child. The best strategy is to build a fortress of bodies and blankets around the youngest, pinning them into the warmest spot and daring anyone to wriggle free. You invent games on the spot. Freeze tag becomes literal. Huddle like a hedgehog is an art. And shush, the baby is finally asleep is your Olympic event. Clothing is a constant negotiation. Every morning, you scavenge for anything even remotely clean and dry, wrap the littlest ones like cabbage rolls, and pray their hands and ears don't poke out. Socks are rare treasures, always mismatched and always slightly damp, but you stuff them into boots or, failing that, just wrap their feet in scraps and hope for the best. You have a 6th sense for cold noses. If you see a child rubbing their hands or shivering, you descend with another scarf, another blanket, or if you're desperate, the family dog. Feeding children in winter is a daily production. Meals are served in bowls that double as hand warmers, and the no food left behind rule is strictly enforced. If someone refuses to finish their turnip stew, you remind them loudly and often that hungry children in other villages would be delighted for that meal. Second helpings are rare, but the promise of a slightly less cold belly is enough to keep most kids eating, even if they do grumble the whole way through. Toys are whatever you can find. A stick, a rock, an old button, or, for the truly fortunate, a rag doll stuffed with straw. You encourage games that require minimal movement. Who can stay still the longest is a perennial favorite, and only mildly discourage wrestling matches, as long as they happen near the fire, and don't result in anyone rolling directly into it. Discipline in winter is mostly about volume control and damage limitation. You perfect the look, that steely medieval stare that communicates. If you open that door again, You'll be sleeping in the goat shed. There's always a younger sibling plotting an escape, a toddler convinced the world outside is a playground, and an older child determined to prove they're not afraid of the cold. Chasing after them is a last resort. You'll only do it if you absolutely have to, and you'll tell the story of your heroic rescue for years. But there's joy, too, tucked between the shivers and the scolding. When the family huddles by the fire, sharing warmth, stories, and the occasional laugh, you remember why you work so hard to keep everyone safe. It's not just about surviving another winter, it's about doing it together, with every frozen toe and wind-chapped cheek a badge of honor. So, the next time you hear someone complain about helicopter parenting, picture the medieval mother, keeping her brood alive with a pile of rags, a wall of bodies, and a look that could freeze water. In the Middle Ages, love was measured in blankets, and bedtime was the safest, warmest place of all. You feel nature's call at 2 a.m. The outhouse is across a yard full of snow, so you fumble for the family chamber pot. It's already half full, lukewarm, and someone forgot to empty it. You weigh your options, bravery or bladder control, just another night's event in the ongoing medieval winter games. This is not the glamour side of medieval living, but it's the reality for every man, woman, and especially woman, shivering in the dark and quietly debating the risks of movement. Outside, the wind howls like a pack of wolves with sinus infections. Inside, the air isn't much warmer, and the chamber pot is a test of courage, coordination, and diplomacy. The stakes? High. The dignity? Low. Chamber pots, or nightjars, are the unsung heroes of winter survival. They come in various forms: a battered wooden bucket, a chipped ceramic bowl, or, if you're fancy, a small metal pot with a handle that gets suspiciously warm far too quickly. There's one for the whole family, so you'd better hope your household is on good terms. No one wants to discover a surprise left by Uncle Raymond after an especially bean-heavy supper. The first hurdle is getting out from the tangle of blankets and bodies without waking up the entire room. You move with the stealth of a medieval ninja. If medieval ninjas were wrapped in 5 layers of wool and half asleep, every step is a crunch of straw, a creak of floorboard, and a whispered prayer that you don't step on the dog, who will definitely make a scene. Now, to locate the chamber pot. In the dark, it's like a medieval game of hot and cold, except it's always cold. And the hot part is not something you want to experience. You gently nudge aside sleeping siblings, sidestep a chicken, and try not to think about the last time the pot was emptied. Success means finding it upright and only halfway full. Failure means a frantic search for clean straw to mop up disaster. Then comes the main event: balancing, aiming, and most importantly, not tipping the pot. Everyone has a story of a disastrous spill, often involving a heroic leap and a sleepless night spent airing out the offending corner of the room. The brave may attempt to empty it outside, risking frostbite, pitch darkness, and a run-in with the night watch goose. The wise just tuck it under the bed and pray it survives till morning. If you're unlucky, the chamber pot is already at maximum capacity. You then face the ultimate test. Can you make it to the outhouse? It's a trek through ice and snow, armed with nothing but a candle stub and desperation. The outhouse itself is little more than a wooden box with holes, a draft that rivals the north wind, and a smell that could stun a Viking. You do your business in record time, convinced you're being watched by something with glowing eyes, and return to bed feeling both triumphant and slightly frostbitten. In the morning, the chamber pot is the first order of business. No one wants the job, so you invent a round-robin system of whoever's up first, which always seems to fall to the youngest or whoever sneezes the loudest. You stagger outside, carefully avoiding the icy path, and dump the contents into the communal waste heap, adding a silent prayer for fewer beans at dinner tonight. Despite the indignities, there's camaraderie in the nightly ritual. You swap stories with the neighbors about midnight misadventures, lost shoes, and near misses with the family cat. You laugh, you groan, and you agree that the chamber pot may be the least glamorous, most essential piece of technology in the whole village. So, the next time you grumble about a cold bathroom floor or slow plumbing, picture your medieval self, squinting in the moonlight, clutching a pot, and competing in the ancient art of the chamber pot Olympics. In winter, everyone's a champion, if only for surviving the night without a spill. So, as tonight's journey through medieval winter draws to a close, take a deep breath. Let your blanket hug you a little tighter. You've just spent the last hour surviving drafty huts, frozen toes, and a level of communal sleeping that could turn even the closest family into sworn enemies. You've braved the bucket bath lottery, the relentless itch of straw mattresses, and the subtle horror of livestock snoring 2 feet from your head. But you made it. You learned the ancient art of layering grime for warmth. You mastered the strategic dash to the chamber pot, and you survived the never-ending draft with nothing but rags, prayers, and a fierce commitment to not being the first one up to fetch more wood. It's funny, isn't it? History, when you really look at it, is just a collection of stubborn, hopeful people muddling through a world that seemed designed to freeze, starve, or mildly humiliate them. Yet medieval women endured all of it, with humor, with grit, and with a resilience that frankly makes complaining about a lukewarm shower seem a little silly. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into your impossibly soft bed, maybe spare a thought for your ancestors, especially the women who kept the hearth burning, the children wrapped up, and the animals mostly outside. Whisper a quiet thank you for central heating, hot water, and a mattress that doesn't crunch or crawl. Because history may be disgusting, uncomfortable, and sometimes absurd, but it's also proof that people are wildly resourceful and occasionally hilarious. When the world turns cold, you, me, everyone listening right now, we're all here because someone in the past survived nights so bleak and bizarre they'd make a reality show look tame. Sleep well, knowing you're safe, warm, and as far from medieval winter as you can possibly get. Good night.